Welcome to JLive. I'm Laura Mandel, JArts Executive Director, and it's great to be with you for JLive, the JArts virtual series of bite-sized conversations about Jewish life and art with the best artists with Boston connections. Today, I feel so lucky to be with artist Julie Weitz, who is the unpainted face behind My Golem. Julie's new piece, Golem v. Golem, which is one of 3 projects in the National Dwelling in a Time of Plagues project put on by Canvas, as you may have seen, includes an Instagram TV series and a physical installation on the Vilna Shul here in Boston on the famed Beacon Hill. This project and whole concept has so many layers to it, so I'm excited that we have a chance to be with Julie today. Hi, Julie.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, of course, before we start, as we've been joking, there are so many cooks in this kitchen, and it's been just wonderful to have all these different collaborators on this project. So I just want to say a huge thank you to our many, many partners on this Dwelling in a Time of Plagues project who have made this all possible. First and foremost, Rebecca Guber and Renana Neumann, our brilliant producer partners at Asylum Arts, our literary partners at the Jewish Book Council. They brought in Moriel Rothman-Zecher, an incredible author who's written a companion piece to this project that we will share a link to. Thank you to our partners at the Vilna Shul, of course, for being the physical home of this project for Passover. Thank you to the Council of American Jewish Museums, where I happen to sit on the board, for coordinating this whole project. To Canvas, Jewish Arts Funders Network, who, like I said, have made this entire dream a reality. And a huge special thanks shout out to Kristen Hoskins, the brilliant project producer behind all of this, who is Boston-based. So if you have questions during our conversation, please put them in the Q&A at the bottom, and we will answer as many of them as time allows. So Julie, I like to say welcome to Boston, even though you're not actually here with us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So I have been excited to bring your work to town because I think it's so special. So before we go into the actual piece, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your work, your process, how you've come to create this Golem character.
Yes, happy to. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Julie Weitz. I'm an artist based in Los Angeles. And I started this Golem project in 2017 after watching the Charlottesville rally and hearing the chanting of the white supremacists shouting, "Jews will not replace us," and feeling like I had to respond in some way. And previous to that, I had been making video art and had always been interested in putting myself into my videos in a way that previously I was sort of hiding my identity. And this project gave me an opportunity to sort of out myself as Jewish in a way that I haven't had to, and to really consider what that might mean. And so through this mythological figure of the Golem and embodying this character, I could speak to Jewish issues and questions of Jewish identity in America at this time of rising white supremacy and anti-Semitism that felt very authentic to who I was and how I was raised. And the interesting thing is, like, I didn't have an expectation that the project would grow in the way that it did. And initially what happened is I dressed up as this golem, filmed myself, and made these kind of ridiculous, very short videos that I posted to Instagram that were like revenge videos where the golem was threatening the white supremacists and sort of making fun of them. And they really took off. Like, I think people really responded to them in a way, and I started getting these other invitations to develop the project. And so here we are now, 4.5 years later, and it's, become the thing that it is, really taken on a life of its own, which is very much part of the Golem mythology, is that at a certain point, the creator makes the golem, and then the golem gets out of control and does their own thing.
So I love that you just touched on like the inception of the Golem story. I know for you, there is so much depth of knowledge to your Jewish story. Can you tell us a little bit more about the backstory of the Golem and how you actually came to it before you even created this character?
Yeah, definitely. Well, so I think I was first introduced to the Golem mythology probably in college. I took a Jewish women's writing course, and there was a Cynthia Ozick book that talks about the Golem. And the Golem mythology, before it became sort of the Yiddish folklore that we know it to be, before that, it shows up in the Sefer HaYetzirah, so in Kabbalistic texts. And it's imagined at that point in like the Middle Ages as a meditative technique for becoming closer to God. So the Kabbalists would talk about the possibility of creating a figure out of clay, and there were all these certain incantations to recite and different rituals to bring this character to life. And it was almost like an astral projection of another body, like an out-of-body experience. And it wasn't until maybe like the 19th century that it becomes this whole folklore, the Golem of Prague, which incidentally was attributed to the Maharal of Prague, but was actually written by Udall Rosenberg. I think his name is Udall Rosenberg, who had hidden his name from writing the story about the golem because at that time a rabbi couldn't write like a piece of fiction. And that's a whole nother story, but it's like once I dived into the history and context of golem mythology, it's really like a fascinating story. And the storyline in all of them is that the Jews were threatened and needed a protector. So it's sort of like it then became a superhero character, actually, if you're familiar with the Michael Chabon's book, The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. So I love that idea that the Jewish community needed this figure of hope and justice and protection.
It's like the most beautiful metaphor for everything today, for all the reasons you use this character.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really, really beautiful. So tell us a little bit more about this Golem v. Golem project that's happening for Passover, and how is this an extension of the other Golem pieces you've done, and where does this come from?
Yeah, so when I got the commission from Asylum Arts to create a project inspired by Passover, it was right at the moment that Trump was leaving office. And I realized, wow, this project began with Trump's presidency and the rise of white supremacy and anti-Semitism. And now there's like this maybe possibility of concluding the project, which I don't know if that's the case yet, but that I wanted to sort of tie that into the Passover story in thinking about the struggle between tyranny and freedom, and using the characters of Pharaoh as the tyranny and freedom, Moses, and imagining how the experience of creating this project for myself really involved the struggle between my own identity and the different ways that I inhabit my Jewishness, but also my whiteness, and coming to understand the privilege of whiteness and being a white Jew, and how that holding space for this multiplicity of identity. And I think, that really, I only became aware of it in this moment in time where, the rise of white supremacy and anti-Semitism collided, and I had to understand what this meant. And so I can talk about that more, but it might help to also show images so that people can become familiar with what I'm talking about.
Great.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah, so what I decided to do is create this film series, 8-part episodic series called Golem v. Golem, where I'm sort of trying to figure out what my relationship is with this character that I created. And then in this instance, you're seeing a behind the scenes shot. I actually hired a body double to play the role of Golem so that I could inhabit, so that we could be two bodies together in the same space. But you can flip to the next image.
And Julie, I understand this is the first time you've worked with a body double, correct?
Yeah, completely. I've always been the one embodying and characterizing the golem. And I wear this white makeup, and it's very highly stylized. And the word Emet is on her forehead. But in this project, I also created this structure where there was a screen, and we filmed myself or Golem and then projected that on the screen, and then have the opposite character interacting with the Golem. And if you plug into the series, which will be posted on Instagram and Facebook, you'll become more familiar with how that works. But one of the ways I moved forward on this project with my collaborators was thinking about the screen as this mediator between these two characters. And the Golem project really came about on the screen, like through social media. So it felt very apropos that I would use the screen as this way to interface with a character that is me and is not me. So you can turn to the next slide. in the course of the series, I talk about all these different ways that I inhabited the character. So one aspect of the character is I actually started to show up at protests in character as a form of kind of political theater. And specifically, I would show up to these protests in defense of immigrant rights and against ICE. And you might be familiar with the organization Never Again, which is a progressive Jewish organization that supports immigrants' rights. And so I was working as an activist with them already, and I decided to go in character as a way to bring more visual spectacle and also an element of joy into it, because for example, we showed up at one of the Geo Group, which is the private prison company that runs some of the ICE detention centers. And we showed up and performed a Purim spiel in front of their office. And it was so playful and so fun. And so that was really inspired by my Golem character. And then, you know, my fellow activists decided to get into characters too, to play the different roles of the Purim story. So, but in this series, Golem v. Golem, I start to understand what it meant to show up in this, you know, hyperbole of a Jewish identity. Obviously, she's wearing the stremel, she's wearing the payas and the tefillin, and there's all these markers of how she's Jewish. And in person, I never felt threatened by exposing myself in that way, but online, I ended up receiving a lot of anti-Semitic attacks, and there was like some moments of really anti-Semite trolling. And so in this series, I even start to address that and what that meant. And you can move to the next slide. Let's see. There were so many components to this project. So one aspect was the character goes to the desert. I made a video where she's really almost searching for God in the desert, and which is very much in alignment with the Passover story too, of Moses going to the desert and the burning bush. And there's a way in which my own personal experience in creating this project actually brought me closer to a spiritual relationship to Judaism, in that she was so grounded in spirit, and aspects of my religion that I hadn't completely dealt with, like as an adult, I think kind of came to light, and that was really exciting. So in one of the episodes, I speak to that experience of becoming closer to my connection to God through the character. And let's see what, maybe the next slide. And then, spoiler alert, towards the end, there is this exchange where I essentially de-animate my golem. There's like a union of the two figures. And if you're familiar with the golem story, Emet is written on the forehead, which means truth. But if you remove the aleph, then you have Met, which means death. And that's how traditionally in the story, the golem gets de-animated. Doesn't die, but maybe just lives up in the attic of a synagogue, which maybe goes well with the next image, which is at the Vilna Shul. And this was such a unique opportunity to get to do an art installation at a historic shul in Boston, which of course I wish I could go to, but because of the pandemic, haven't been able to. So what we decided to do here is take two iconic images of the project and post them as banners on the facade of the shul, and then match them with adapted quotes from Exodus. So I drew her out of the water. You could flip maybe to the next image. Oh, well, I'll talk about this image first. Is one other iteration of my golem that's the most recent is she becomes a wildland firefighter. And that project was really inspired by the fact that it was time for her to protect the trees. I live in California. The threat of wildfires is so real. So I decided she would address ecological catastrophe. But that also bodes well with this idea of that they may worship me in the wilderness, which is a quote from Exodus, which is the text on the banner that matches on the front gate. And then we have the other image, which is the golem performing tashlich, which was another aspect of the project. She was invited by the New Shul in New York City to lead folks at the waterfront in tashlich service. And I was really thinking about one aspect of the Golem v. Golem story that I bring up is that the word Moses literally translates as to draw out because Moses was drawn out of the water by Pharaoh's daughter. And so that really resonated for me, this idea that I drew this character out of me, that, you know, also Golem literally means shapeless mass. And so it's this idea out of nothing, you can create something. And again, she's really taken on a life of her own. Let's see, I think, is that it for the images? Yeah, so I've gone on and on. What are there
No,
other
Julie, this
questions?
is fascinating. I think the amount of Jewish tradition and story that you can embed in these pieces is kind of astounding to me. I mean, it's really incredible how you are doing exactly what we always seek to do through J-Arts programming, which is how do we contemporize and refresh and reinvigorate these ancient traditions and stories that are so significant. So I really just want to say thank you. Let me ask you this, because this is something I haven't talked to you about yet, and I'm intrigued. So you probably don't know this. I used to design costumes. So the costume, right? So the costumes and the dress of the Golem is just fascinating to me. I mean, I love how you have these like oversized seat and sort of exaggerated costume elements that, as you already said, visibly show this Jewish piece. Can you tell us a little bit about the costumes and how those came to be?
Yes. Well, this is a great opportunity to shout out to my collaborator, Jill Spector, who is here today. Thank you, Jill, for being here. She was the art director and has been the costume designer on all of these projects. And Jill comes from a similar Jewish background as me. And right away, when we started talking, there was just so much resonance in how we were imagining the character could evolve through the costume. And, you know, this project is deeply collaborative. So it is so fun to get to bring people in who have these similar interests and curiosities. And Jill just understood so well and continues to understand, because we continue to make costumes together, like what these aspects of Jewish aesthetics and costume and religious garb, what they mean and how we can push them forward more in these really meaningful ways. And also be playful about it. And then, of course, there's this way that, so for example, the tzitzit, which are 25 feet long, I made them and I tied them according to the tradition, which there's like, you know, this whole system of numerology that adds up to 613, the number of commandments. And there's something like about doing that, even though I'm doing it for this fictional character that's like this exaggerated performance art project, at the same time, there's something deeply religious and spiritual about tying those knots and really feeling connected to this ancient tradition. And so I really, and even this, I'll add, I was telling Jill this the other day, that I've never worn a tallis when I've prayed. And through this project, because we made a tallis katan for a different project, I actually am ready to wear one myself. So somehow the project, the character becomes like a surrogate for things that I'd like to do, that I'm willing to do with her because it's more transgressive and playful, that maybe I can then integrate into my actual life.
Julie, I'm more inspired every time I talk to you. That is really beautiful. I mean, I love that there's such personal depth and that there's such artistic depth, Jewish depth. I mean, you are really amazing. This is really, really special. Okay, so normally on JLive, we like to leave people with sort of something positive or motivating in this moment of COVID. And I will obviously right up front say everyone needs to watch these videos that Julie will be releasing on her Instagram account each day of Passover. We'll put the Instagram account into the chat so you can find it, but it's my Golem. But Julie, anything else to offer?
Well, something I've been thinking about is, you know, we imagine ourselves in Mitzrayim and this inner Mitzrayim where we're leaving this narrow space. And even though this is our second time around of doing the Seders during the pandemic, I feel like there's a sense of hope and possibility, that there is this, you know, where more and more of us are getting vaccinated, that we can I'm really focusing on this idea that we are leaving, you know, the plagues, the hell that we've been experiencing this past year, and we're entering into some other place. and that we can bring spiritual intention into that, as the slaves did as they crossed the Red Sea.
Yeah, very much so. I keep thinking we are literally in the moment of crossing through that parted sea, and we'll see what's on the other side.
Yeah, yeah, and there might be some trepidation crossing over, right? This is the small baby steps to get there.
Julie, this is fascinating, and I could probably spend all day talking to you, but I have promised everyone 20 minutes, so I'm going to have us wrap up. But I just want to say thank you so much for this. I hope that everybody will make their way, if you are in Boston, downtown to the Vilna Shul to see the physical installation. But wherever you are, please watch these videos, engage, share. I have to admit that I actually wrote my most recent installation of my new Urt Dvar Torah blog about my Golem, because Julie, in my mind, you are a rabbi. What you're bringing to us is really just so satisfying to my soul. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be a part of this project, and I'm so grateful for all the partners. And it's been fantastic to work with you and Asylum Arts. And thank you for being so supportive.
Great. Thank you so much. So, of course, thank you, Julie. Thank you to everyone involved who we've mentioned. And right now we are lucky to have Kristen Hazel, who is the Director of Development for the Vilna Shul, with us to make a few remarks and close us out. So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Julie, for sharing your work with us. We are honored to host the Boston installation of this powerful art exhibition at the Vilna Shul, Boston Center for Jewish Culture. Julie displays a host of modern-day plagues to depict the challenges we face here today, and her art installation sensitizes us to the fragility of our world and creates a link between the biblical plagues of the Jewish people, recalled each year on Passover, and set of modern challenges she forces us to confront as citizens of the world. During the Spanish flu of 1919, this historic synagogue was established by Lithuanian Jews who had immigrated to the United States in pursuit of greater freedom and opportunity. Raising this installation atop the only immigrant-era synagogue in Boston adds a layer of symbolism to the exhibit. Passover helps us to see the light at the end of the tunnel and new beginnings, just as we start to see the light at the end of this pandemic tunnel. I do think it's coming. Everything going forward will be new, just as everything was new as the Jews left Egypt. We want to respectfully honor this literal modern plague while reflecting on the historical significance of the pilgrimage of both the Jews who built the Vilna and the Jews who left Egypt. We are grateful for the opportunity to share Julie's art and the Vilna with you. So if you're in the area, please stop by. If not, please watch the videos. Thank you for joining us today.